This Week in Parasitism is brought to you by the American Society for Microbiology at microbeworld.org/TWiP. This Week in Parasitism, episode 93, recorded on July 9th, 2015. Hi, everybody. I'm Vincent Racaniello, and with me is Dickson Despommier.
Good morning, Vincent. And notice I said good morning, because usually this is, well, I guess we've been in the morning recently, so this is good morning forever.
This is earlier than usual.
This is really early, and in fact,
9:30 a.m.
It's hard to tell what the weather is outside because I can't see beyond the window. Actually, I can. It's a little cloud. It's a lot cloudy. It's almost raining. It probably is. The humidity is 100%. The temperature is about 85 degrees. And we've had miserable weather for the whole week. And when is summer going to arrive? Ha, ha, ha.
Also joining us is Daniel Griffin.
Good morning, everybody.
I don't know if you can get a word in there.
Like that dreary little thing.
I did feel that New Yorker tendency to jump in and
you restrained yourself.
We're going to do that again, aren't we?
It is raining out there, actually.
Dickson, you know, it's only 20 degrees Celsius, which is 68 Fahrenheit.
Right now?
It feels much warmer, but it must be the humidity because it's 81%
It feels
humidity.
much warmer.
There's a flood watch for Putnam, New York.
I know.
Where's Putnam?
Putnam is north from
How far?
North. It's about 20 miles north.
Yeah, it's a miserable morning. It's very soupy outside.
It's very depressing.
But here in the TWiP studio, the TWiP studio.
TWiP studio is perfect.
We got the three of us around a desk full of viruses and worms.
we do. And bacteria, don't forget the bacteria. Come on, the microbiomes are all about the bacteria.
And the climate is controlled. It's right where we want it.
What I want to say is that my wife and I took a trip to Peru.
You didn't raise your hand, Dickson.
You're damn. Okay, there goes the hand. My wife and I took a trip to Peru, and you're about to go down to Peru, and you're going to go to Lima, and you're going to spend how long in Lima?
Couple weeks.
Couple of weeks. Look out the window.
Taking your kids?
No.
Daniel.
Just you and your wife?
No, I'm going to be at the Gorgas Institute down there, but seeing a lot of tropical diseases.
Oh, look.
Cool. You're going to work? You're going to be just, what do you call it? Diagnosing infections? Is that the idea?
You know, I will be enjoying myself. This is, when we were in Africa last time, and I went and spent the day at Kazuma Central Hospital seeing HIV patients. That's my kids think it's interesting, but that's my idea of fun on vacation.
So what I'm saying to you is take a look out the window because that's what Lima looks like every day.
Is that right?
It's
foggy?
Single day.
Why? Why is that?
Because of its geography. Mm-hmm. It's a pocket within the coastline of Peru, and the wind is prevailing from the west to the east, and the water is extremely cold because I believe it's the Humboldt current, but I could be wrong on that one. But nonetheless, the cold water and the warm air combine together to produce that kind of a scene. And it pushes the clouds into the pocket where Lima is. It stays there all year. They rarely, if ever, see the sun.
I'm not going there.
Exactly. And Daniel, you should be prepared for this. This is typical Lima weather.
I will report.
That's why we are recording so soon after the last episode, which was barely a week ago.
This is true.
Because Daniel will be gone for the rest of the year, right?
Not quite.
The rest of the summer? When are you coming back?
It'll be the end of
August.
Actually, I guess it'll be end of August, early September by the time I.
All right. And
I'll be
Dickson
back on the 15th of August.
So these guys are going to be gone for a while.
So it is in a hiatus.
Are we not going to do a TWiP until September then? Is that the plan?
I think that's going to happen.
Okay.
I think when we looked at schedules, we're just all kind of booked out.
Could happen.
All right.
Could happen.
Well, everyone will be sad.
We'll just
including
make this
us.
one to remember.
But think of all the cases that you're going to learn about down in Peru that you can
You're
bring
going to bring
back.
some back, maybe?
I'll definitely, talk about some of them.
We had a couple of follow-ups today.
Right.
Or follows-up. One is from Sandra, who writes, Daniel, addressing this to you. I was fascinated by your answer to the case from TWiP 91, the life cycle of the Southeast Asian worm. I won't even try to spell it. RE, early symptom coughing and wheezing. If the emergency department did a chest x-ray out of concern about the lungs, would the x-ray give any clue as to the true cause? So what is this? Can you remind us?
I think she was talking about the Loffler's syndrome with with the
ascaris. That's right.
And I don't think that you're going to see much on the X-ray, unfortunately. Fortunately, just from as we talked about, the diagnostic challenge, you're not going to have much objective to make this diagnosis. It's going to have to be clinical.
You won't see any worms in the lungs.
You're definitely going to see them on chest X-ray. They're,
No, they're too small.
Too small.
Too small.
They're microscopic. Remember, they crawled into the alveolus.
Yeah, sure.
So. But if you collected sputum, and you looked at the sputum, you might be able to see the larvae.
Yeah, I would throw a mite in there. I mean, that's
right.
All right, Anthony writes, if memory serves me correctly, in dogs and cats, roundworms evacuated after a dose of piperazine tend to coil in a watch spring shape unlike any other worms. Is this not the case with human roundworms? Is the watch spring shape in dog and cat roundworms an effect of piperazine, or is the lack of this form in the human parasite images an effect of preservation? Tangentially, the reason for the parasite jumping ship in the case study was attributed to the stress of acquiring the craft of medicine. If this wasn't meant as dry humor, should such apprenticeship be questioned? If a parasite senses their vessel to be sinking, it would seem that these conditions could be defined as cruel and unusual punishment for a mass murderer. Is there really a need for every doctor to have experience functioning under extremes of sleep deprivation? And should patients be exposed to a judgment-impaired novice?
Ooh.
2 questions. All right, let's do the first one.
Yeah.
Okay, what was the first one?
First one is, after you give them drugs,
watch spring behavior.
do human roundworms coil? Do you know, Dickson?
Well, I know the behavior because I worked on Trichinella for so many years. When you take a roundworm out of its habitat, all right, it has 2 behaviors. One is the watch spring behavior, and that happens when you digest Trichinella larvae out of their nurse cells or in the muscle cells in order to infect another animal. That's how you would handle that. And they just coil and uncoil. That's all they do. Mm-hmm. However, if you allow them to sense the environment, because right now they're protected with a Teflon-like coating of a membrane that they acquire during the infection. If you digest that membrane to allow communication to the outside, where the larva actually perceives where it is, and therefore is the thought pattern in the brain of this little monster is, I'm now in the stomach because I've just experienced pepsin, so I don't want to infect yet. But if you pepsin digest and then trypsin digest afterwards, you can remove a portion of this outer layer, and they switch their behavior from a coiling and uncoiling to serpiginous behavior. And now they're ready to infect. What he's referring to is the effect of piperazine citrate on the nervous system of the worm. And it paralyzes the worm. So I'm surprised that the worms can move at all, because with ascaris, the adult ascaris for humans, they're flaccid. They pass out and they don't even move. So that when you wash out the piperazine, they resume their motion, which is, in this case, a serpiginous motion. And that's how they actually hold on to the gut tract. They assume an S shape, and they press up against both walls of the small intestine. And that's how they maintain their position in the gut.
So, human is different from dogs and cats.
I don't know, but that was a long explanation.
Because dog and cats, he says they come out coiled.
Yeah, I know. So they're a much smaller worm than the adult of ascaris, so maybe the size has something to do with it, but I don't think so.
But your understanding is that in humans, where you evacuate with the drug,
they're flaccid. They're absolutely flaccid. They're paralyzed for sure.
Okay, now Daniel.
Judgment
impaired
clinicians. This is actually, I think, a very important, but I'll say controversial topic. And I lived through this transition, and people may remember there was something called the Bell Commission, and there was a gentleman was involved with one of the papers, we'll keep it vague, and his daughter ended up having a bad outcome at one of the New York hospitals. And it created a lot of focus on the issue of our sleep-deprived training physicians performing substandard care. And so the initial push on limiting resident hours was an effort to improve patient outcomes. That was the idea. And so there are 2 sides of this. One is shortening shifts, limiting the number of hours that physicians work, does that actually improve patient care? That's one question. The other is it just really inhumane? I mean, for 7 years of my life, I averaged 120 hours of a work week, which really meant very little sleep. And is that really okay to do to human beings? Is it kind of cruel and unusual that we put people through that? So the first is the issue of, do you get better patient care by shortening hours? And it has not been convincing that you do. And if anything, there might be a bit of evidence that by shortening the number of hours that physicians work, increasing the number of times that physicians need to hand a patient off, you may actually end up with worse care, because the next person coming in, there's only so much time that you can spend telling them about the patient. They haven't been there for the last, well, in our case, for the last 36 hours. In 36 hours, you really know someone pretty well. You're gone out of the hospital for 10 hours, and you're back again for 36 hours. So you really, 120 hours a week, you know this patient, you got a call, you may be sleep deprived, but you know the patient so well that the care is not actually improved, unfortunately. So that's the one challenge. And I remember, and we'll get to the second part, that when I finished my time at Bellevue and I was looking at residencies, we were starting to see this handoff issue. And then these people came in, the night shift people, right? And so everyone could go home and get some sleep. They bring people in at night. There'd be less of these clinicians in at night. They didn't know the patient at all. They didn't have that connection. I mean, when you admit a patient, when you're with them 120 hours a week, you really connect and care about them and know the subtleties. When they got a call at 2 a.m, it was just one more fever to them. I mean, it's hard when you've got 60 patients they're covering. So I actually actively avoided programs with these night shifts and limited hours because I was concerned about the quality of care that was being delivered in those places. The second is is this just cruel and unusual? It is really tough. It is really tough to go, you for 7 years of your life. I think I was home one time for Christmas for like 2 hours, and I was like, I got to go back. And, you're missing time with family. I mean, a lot of physicians now are trying to balance family and children. And for really 7 years, maybe it's longer if you're going to do a fellowship. Now it's up to 9 years, 10 years, etc. I think there is really a balance. How do you provide a high level of patient care? How do you get the degree of training and actually still then be able to practice medicine and come out while you're still somewhat young? It's all a challenge. And yes.
Daniel, wasn't there also an issue about pay?
There definitely was an issue. The pay has gotten a lot better. Back when I was training, the pay was very, very limited.
Talking about for residents.
For residents, it was very limited. Very difficult. You'd finished medical school. You had enormous amounts of debt. And then for the next several years, you were just sort of barely getting by. I mean, if you're working 120 hours a week, I mean, what do you need? But...
yeah.
So could you spend that money?
Yeah, what are you going to spend your money on?
Well, you have a family, presumably.
That's the challenge. Right? That's the challenge.
So right now, what are the hours for a resident?
So residents, they want it capped at 80, and then they limit the period, how
80
long.
80 per week, right?
80 hours per week is the maximum.
And how many straight hours?
I'm not sure exactly what the straight hours are right now. It's definitely, not more than 24.
So it used to be 36, right?
We used to do, for about a third of my residency was 36 on, 12 off, basically every other night.
And was that done because of this continuity with patient care? Is that what drove that initially, or was
I think it's history, right?
Yeah.
So
I don't think anyone thought it.
Speaking of novice, was the chief resident always present to oversee the novices, so to speak?
Who
was in charge?
Well, the chief resident, in a lot of ways, because is sort of this administrative position. Just to maybe give everyone a sense of the way the training works. The first year that you're out, we're all interns. Not to be confused with internal medicine docs. An intern is the first year. And surgeons, clinical physicians all do this 1 year of internship. When you are supervised by sort of directly supervised by a more senior resident. Your second, your third, and maybe up to your fifth year, depending upon which residency you're in. So
and
the
this
initial
is in
training.
your field of choice.
In your field of choice. Let's say you're a general surgeon. It'll be 1 year of internship, 4 years of being a resident, gradually second, third, fourth. Internal medicine, it'll be 1 year internship. Second year, you're a resident. Third year, resident.
Then there's also infectious diseases.
Now, if you want to do cardiology, infectious disease, you're going to then go back for more years after the first 3.
So you do general medicine for 4 years?
General medicine for 3 years.
Okay.
They call you a second-year resident, even though it's really your first year of not being an intern.
Right.
And then, so you're always being, and at any point in time, and this has gotten better now, if the resident sees a case with the intern and they're not sure, they, minutes later, they're on the phone with the attending, who is a licensed, experienced clinician. They say, here's the story, here's what we're seeing.
Board
And,
certified.
if it's July, which we're now in, often that attending will physically come in or be in there to check the exam themselves, look at things. But as the year goes by, you get to know, you can trust the history, the information. You go through, you say, well, what about this? And why don't we check this? And why don't you do this now? So there's a lot of supervision that goes on.
Yep.
I remember I had a friend who was a surgical resident, and on July 4th he was on duty, and someone came in who had blown his hand apart with a firecracker.
How unusual.
And so he had severed all the ligaments, so he went into the surgical suite to start repairing it. And he said, I don't know which to connect with which.
Mean they're not numbered?
So he didn't know how to do this, so he went to the phone and he called the attending he would call, and the attending said, well, you just pull and see which finger responds, and then you should know which one to connect. He didn't know this.
They're not color-coded?
You just pull it, and your finger goes, and then I guess you should know which one. Can you imagine hooking the thumb up to the pinky?
I can imagine,
It's
but
not funny, but I'm sure it's
Not
been
funny.
done.
Exactly
No, I mean, sometimes they'll actually do things along those lines. Let's say you blew your thumb off completely, and the thumb is really an important digit there. So often you'll they'll do these transplants where you'll use one of the other fingers, and and the nervous system can relearn and do it. But no, I mean, I think that was sort of the system in the old days. There was always somebody who was getting a decent amount of sleep. Maybe it was the attending. And so, you might be sleep deprived, you were exhausted, and but maybe a more senior resident, and then particularly the attending would be like, all right, so,
I remember my dad, he was a surgeon, and he was an attending, but he was always out also. He'd get called in the middle of the night, come home at 5 a.m., and then shower and leave again by 6. He was, but
it's a rough life.
He fell asleep at the wheel all the time. And
see, I never did that, and but when you
couldn't afford a car, that's why.
But now when you go out in private practice, right, there's no limits. And
that's right.
You may end up working more hours in private practice than you do.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is a whole huge topic, and it's a challenge. I mean, what are the issues? Is it cruel and unusual to subject human beings to this degree of training? Is it? I'm not sure it compromises patient care. So it really, I think, comes back to the latter.
Maybe we
issue.
could do an episode on training of physicians at some point, and you could tell us the whole thing. We go through the whole thing and the issues and the pluses.
I can tell you about admitting physicians because I'm still on the admissions committee. So
you could.
We could start at the very beginning, right? Why would anyone even want to become a doctor?
Yeah, well, it's changed, right?
Yeah, exactly right.
And I think the public also sort of has who do we want to be our clinicians?
That's a tough decision that the admissions committee does make, but on what basis, right? So
what bothers me when I see a doctor? Someone in a pinstriped suit with a tie. I don't want my doctor to wear a pinstriped suit.
Really?
I want them to look like you, to be in the trenches. Casual. If they have scrubs, that's great.
Yeah.
But I just think, and I see them walking around here all the time, and they have their pagers or whatever they still use, and this is corporate America. This is not medicine. Medicine, you get your hands dirty.
I made that comment many times that medicine, it's not white collar work. You're doing stuff. It's not just cognitive. You're also hands on.
There's a very famous picture of the first gene therapy trial done at Penn where they scoped a patient and put adenovirus, and the guy doing this, he's got a mask and a gown. He's got a tie, tightly tied. And I get, why would you want a tight tie when you're doing all
they
of
were
this?
taking
Right?
pictures.
Right.
Good PR.
You would want to scrub, right, in case you're going to get sprayed with stuff.
I think, but you're fighting against something here in the Northeast. The Northeast has this sort of uniform mentality. If you have a nice suit, somehow that's, you're sending this message that you're successful. It was a few years ago. I had actually never owned a suit in my life until a few years ago.
Because Colorado, you don't wear suits, right?
That.
No, and I think it also because it creates a distance.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
Yeah,
people don't often feel quite as comfortable sharing intimate, details with a suit.
What did you wear in the office?
We so at Alpenglow Medical, that was my private practice. We wore collared golf style type shirts,
Like what you have now,
like I am wearing today.
Okay.
And khaki pants.
It's great. Perfect. I think it makes a more connection between the patient and the physician.
And the white coat we would use, if you were going to do a procedure, you'd put it on. Yeah. But no, usually we would not even wear the white coat. I mean, you wanted to create the relationship with the patients, not hierarchical, but where it was an intimate sharing.
No, when my son had surgery here, we went to see his doc several times, and he had scrubs on, which I think, they're all disheveled, and he's got the plumber thing on the back because they're falling down. This is great. I can identify with this guy.
But I think it is true. Some patients do like the doctors to be dressed up. I think when you get to the point of the suit and you're basically spending $1,000 or $1,500 on your pinstripe suit, it's a little much. There is something about being I don't know. Some people have this suggestion that, like, when I wear a bow tie or something, I'm sending that, I'm dressing up for the encounter. I'm trying to send a message of respect. So you always, again, it's like we talked about last time with terminology. You're always trying to speak to the audience. You're trying to look at what will make my patient comfortable, what will send them the message that I care and I'm concerned. And, but at the same time, you also said this is someone who's actually doing a job and not just putting on, some kind of a costume.
This extends to female physicians too. My son sees a female gastroenterologist there, and she's casual, just pants and a shirt.
Yeah,
and
that's
looks like somebody on the street.
It's been an amazing transformation here since I started. I mean, of course, I started in 1970, but everybody wore a suit and tie then.
And the women wear dresses and blouses, right?
That's
very
right.
formal.
Very formal.
And
when you taught, you had to wear a suit and tie. I mean, that was de rigueur. They didn't. You didn't dare show up with that one because all the other people did. So you can't be the different person in this case. So I don't know who made the rule change, but I'm glad they did because it was much easier to teach after that.
All right, let's do our case from last week, and Daniel will remind us what we are dealing with here.
So we have notes now, which is great. This was a 20-year-old Japanese female student. It's out of Colorado State University, Fort Collins, who had been having homemade sushi with her friends. And as we commented, it was salmon that her boyfriend had caught, as well as this sushi-grade tuna. And the salmon was brought to Colorado, but not caught there, caught by the boyfriend. And about an hour or two after eating the sushi, she developed severe pain in her abdomen. And she comes into the emergency room. We say it's left upper quadrant, so we're to try to figure out what it might be.
Indeed.
I'm looking to see if we have any more. Here we go. I just got one more email, so I'm going to paste those into the notes.
Good. Right under the wire.
They come in at the last moment. But anyway, you could take that first one, Daniel, the first guess.
We'll do Robin.
Is there anything else that we need to know before? No, you're going to tell us that later.
No, I don't think anything else that we need to know
go ahead
right now.
And read that first one.
Human infection by Anisakis simplex, the herringworm, and other nematodes or roundworms is caused by eating certain raw or undercooked fish. Ingestion of the worm can result in severe abdominal pain, nausea, and vomiting within hours of ingestion and has been misdiagnosed as appendicitis or other abdominal diseases. If the worms don't get coughed up or vomited out, they can burrow into the walls of the intestines and cause a localized immune response. The worms eventually die and are removed by the immune system. In severe cases, physical removal of the worms by endoscopy or surgery is needed to reduce the pain. People who produce immunoglobulin E in response to this parasite may subsequently have an allergic reaction, including anaphylaxis, after eating fish that have been infected with Anisakis species. Albendazole may be used to treat mild cases. I think that is possible, but we'll say not very common. I'm throwing my little aside in there. But no, what he is describing has been described. Anisakis species have complex life cycles which pass through a number of hosts through the course of their lives. Eggs hatch in seawater, and larvae are eaten by crustaceans, usually euphasids. The infected crustacean is subsequently eaten by a fish or squid, and the nematode burrows into the wall of the gut and insists in a protective coat, usually on the outside of the visceral organs, but occasionally in the muscle or beneath the skin. The life cycle is completed when an infected fish is eaten by a marine mammal, such as a whale, seal, or dolphin. The nematode exists in the intestine, feeds, grows, mates, and releases eggs into the seawater in the host's feces. As the gut of a marine mammal is functionally very similar to that of a human, Anisakis species are able to infect humans who eat raw or undercooked fish. The known diversity of the genus has increased greatly over the past 20 years with the advent of modern genetic techniques in species identification. Each final host species was discovered to have its own biochemically and genetically identifiable sibling species of Anisakis, which is reproductively isolated. This finding has allowed the proportion of different sibling species in a fish to be used as an indicator of population identity in fish stocks. If you copy from one person, it's plagiarism. If you copy from 10 persons, it's a topical discussion. If you copy from 100 persons, it's a subject synopsis. If you copy from 1,000 persons, it's a comprehensive literature review.
That's funny. That's very funny.
That reminds me of the statement, I don't know by who, if one person dies, it's a tragedy. If millions die, it's a statistic.
That's true.
Who said that? I don't remember.
I don't know. It was some military person probably, but that's very true, by the way. So do you know what a euphosit is?
I do not.
I do.
Tell us, Dickson.
Krill. It's related to krill.
Krill, yeah.
So they're the food chain masters, basically. They are the keystone species for both the Southern Ocean and the Northern Ocean, surprisingly.
This is what whales filter out, right?
They do.
With their ballenes.
Krills, exactly right. Exactly right.
They're tiny.
They're tiny, but they're not that tiny. I mean, they're about maybe a half an inch or so.
One species makes up an estimated biomass of 379 million tons.
They are amazingly prolific, and they feed on algae.
And who do the algae feed on?
The sun.
They're at the bottom of the food chain.
They are the beginning of the food chain. Yeah. That is exactly how it starts.
Dickson, can you take Christine's?
Certainly. Christine writes, Dear Vincent, Dickson, and Daniel, thank you again for a great TWiP. Today's case of the young woman with abdominal bloating and pain, vomiting, and nausea is most likely a case of Anisakis, also known as Herringworm disease caused by an infection with Anisakis simplex, or Pseudoterranova discipens. Yeah, it could be one of those two, or many more for that matter. Infective larvae are found in the seawater, having been deposited as eggs in the fecal material of seals, and other mammals, I should add. The infective larvae are taken up by crustaceans that are then consumed by fish or squid. Humans ingest the nematode larvae when they eat raw or undercooked infected fish or squid. The larvae can invade the gastrointestinal tract. Eventually, when the parasite dies, it produces an inflamed mass in the esophagus, stomach, or intestine. Diagnosis is generally made by endoscopy, radiography, or surgery. If the worm has embedded, worms may invade the intestine 1 to 2 weeks after infection. The history of raw fish consumption is helpful for the diagnosis. Signs and symptoms include abdominal pain, nausea, vomiting, abdominal distension, diarrhea, blood on mucus and stool, and a mild fever. Allergic reactions of rash and itching, or less commonly anaphylaxis, can occur. The symptoms can occur within hours of eating the infected fish. The patient, therefore, was most likely infected during the sushi preparation. Sampling before you actually put it all together. It is recommended that the fish, having been caught wild, is gutted and processed immediately to stop the worms moving into the muscle from the fish's body cavity. If the partner who caught the fish did this quickly, only very few worms may have migrated to the muscle nearest the belly, which the patient may have consumed while preparing the sushi using meat from nearest the top of the fish, where the meat is thicker and more colored. The worms are white in color and 1.8 to 3.6 centimeters long and about 1 centimeter wide. I think they're a little less wide than that, actually. Treatment is recommended for his patient to avoid gastrointestinal invasion and further symptoms. Successful treatment of Anisakis with albendazole 400 milligrams orally twice daily for 6 to 21 days has been reported in cases with presumptive, in parentheses, highly suggestive history and or serology diagnosis, although it is not FDA approved for this indication, and there are notes on its use in pregnant and lactating females as well as use in children. Today's weather is beautiful in Brisbane at 20 degrees C and 53% humidity and a light but cool breeze. I finally had to find my sweater. Blue skies with 20, cloud cover, a great day for a barbecue. Keep them coming, Christine from Brisbane.
So this is often on a party boat. When you catch fish, they clean them right there.
Right there.
Is that one of the reasons, perhaps, wise to prevent things from
That's
moving?
wise. They don't do it for that reason. They do it to keep the fish fresh, and then they put them on ice just immediately after that. Or even if you put the fish on ice without cleaning it, it's still fine.
As long as it's on ice?
Yes.
That's the key.
And that's the key.
And that's actually by law now that the fish have to be put immediately on ice.
Yeah.
And what people are talking about here, should it be the correct diagnosis?
Right.
Is a key. It's a key issue. Is when you catch the fish, if you immediately took a bite out of the muscle of the fish, it's okay.
Right.
It's this dying process that triggers this migration into the part where you would.
I was on a party boat years ago. We were fishing for bluefish in the waters off of New Jersey, and there were a number of Korean gentlemen, and whenever they caught a fish, they would immediately carve out the cheeks, put some vinegar on it, and pop it in.
Cheek muscles.
And they loved it. And we're looking at it and go, cheeks?
That's an old Roman habit.
Really?
To do it with salmon. Yeah, they used to eat the cheek muscles and throw the carcasses to the slaves. Now we value the carcass, obviously.
In fact, we would catch, and he would say, "Can I take the cheeks?"
Go right ahead.
Sure.
All right. Peter writes, I would suggest ingestion of Anisakis species as the diagnosis in this case. So I will take April's, who writes, hello, gentlemen. First things first, I would have thought, given your background, Dr. Despommier, that you would know what third shift is, although at this particular moment I can't remember if you were an assistant in a hospital lab. My particular schedule is 10:30 p.m. to 6:30 a.m.
Well, I didn't work in a hospital lab. I worked in a university lab connected to that. It was kind of a interesting hybrid laboratory, basically. They did all the diagnostic work for the Columbia Presbyterian Hospital, but they were part of the School of Public Health, so they were sort of mixed and matched. They didn't have any night shifts. They just put the stool containers in the refrigerator until the next morning to allow us to do our work only during the daytime. So we had no stat emergencies, that sort of thing.
But you knew what shifts were, because you just told Daniel.
Yeah, I did, but I wanted him to describe what it was. Of course.
Yeah, we were talking about this a little before, and when you the shifts here, at least, like out at North Shore, would start. There would be the 6 a.m. shift that would then go for 8 hours. And so if you show up around 11, most of the work has been done. And the reason they're starting so early, some places start even earlier, is that when the clinicians come to the hospital to round prior to going to their practices, I mean, it might be 5:30, it might be 6, might be 7 at the latest. They want to see these results. So you have a first shift that starts rather early. And then that goes until, let's say, 2 in the afternoon. And then the next 8-hour shift is going to go till like 10 at night, in this case, 10:30. And then the third shift is going to be the overnight ones. And, it's moved to the point where people in the hospital are sick, really sick, compared to, I'll say in the old days, you could have back pain and be in and be sitting there. Yeah. Nowadays, when someone comes in at 1 in the morning, at 3 in the morning, you want to be able to provide the same level of care, get the same diagnostic testing done then. And so these third shift folks are there taking care of people that come in.
Right.
Continuing with April, our hospital is also a reference lab for many clinicians and other hospitals in Wisconsin and Illinois. Because of this, we have a robust third shift workload that handles a lot of the molecular testing. It's more cost effective to batch those tests. And all the regular microbiology testing that the hospital requires, think stat, gram stains, positive blood cultures, etc. So stat means right away, right?
Exactly.
Yes. Anyways, you say fish, and I automatically think Diphyllobothrium latum. If I am correct, then other listeners will be as well, and I'm sure they'll go through the lengthy task of explaining life cycle and mode of transmission. I will add this, though. I'm wondering if the patient ingested the salmon as soon as her boyfriend brought it home, then froze it for about a week before serving it to her friends. After that one fateful undergrad parasitology course, I freeze all meat before ingesting it. Thank you so much for the camaraderie. You three are fabulous.
Who could deny that?
Okay, Daniel, you
Elise writes, Dear TWiP Trifecta, as always, thank you so much for your challenges. It is truly summer in lower Manhattan, quite humid and warm, 83F, 28.3C. The kind of weather that makes the dogs exhausted and seek out cool spots to sleep. The case in TWiP 92 is curious because the young student's onset of symptoms is so sudden, and Dr. Griffin seemed to imply strongly that they were brought on by something about her most recent sushi meal, as opposed to anything consumed in prior days or weeks. With so many of the parasites discussed in other cases, it takes some time before the parasite makes itself known through symptoms. So this one is unusual for having such a rapid onset. My guess is that the young woman has an Anisakis infection causing gastric Anisakis contracted from the salmon or the tuna she ate. Anisakis is one of the more likely parasites that can be transmitted by marine fish. The patient's sudden abdominal pain, particularly the tenderness in the upper left quadrant, and vomiting suggests that the Anisakis larvae have penetrated her stomach wall. The stomach, spleen, and some of the colon are in this quadrant of the abdomen within a few hours of her having ingested it. As to why the patient is the only person from her sushi dinner party to get sick, it is likely that she was the only one to have the bad luck of eating a piece of fish that contained the larvae. It is possible, though, for people to develop intestinal anisakiasis, the symptoms of which set in after 7 days. There is also frightening-sounding Anisakis-induced anaphylaxis. The literature is quite matter-of-fact about the treatment for gastric Anisakis because the larvae don't survive any human host. We are called a dead-end host for the parasite, which needs to be passed from a fish or squid to a marine mammal in order to complete its developmental cycle. Patients can be treated by having the larvae removed with endoscopy, and patients can also be treated with albendazole. I'm not sure if I am correct with my diagnosis, but this was the most likely parasite I could find that causes such sudden symptoms. Where did the student's boyfriend catch the salmon, by the way? I know that tuna could also be a culprit, but I was curious. As always, many thanks.
All right, Dickson, the last one. Did you get it there? It's from Eric.
I did not get it.
Let me refresh your iPad for
Would you please?
Why don't you read
you
off
could read
mine
his.
while you...
Sure.
There you go.
Okay.
Because I just pasted it
Eric writes, Dear TWiPers, 2 Ps, I'm writing with a guess for the case of the week for TWiP 92. This case seems quite a bit harder than the last two, and I don't feel as confident that the clues lead to a clear answer. The question I wish I could have asked before I made my guess: how often does this patient engage in sushi making events, and especially not using commercially caught sashimi-grade fish? I will go out on a limb and guess that this sushi-making event is not an isolated event and that the patient has engaged in this activity many times. I will guess that the current symptoms are not from the recent event, but rather caused from an event long past, perhaps one where a freshwater fish was consumed, perhaps caught by the patient's brother. I will guess that this hapless young woman is suffering from the effects of infection with Diectophama renale, a giant kidney worm. This would perhaps explain the tender abdomen and the fever, and perhaps the enlarged abdomen, although that is a stretch. The enlarged abdomen, that is a stretch. I hope there's no pun intended there. I am haunted by the anemic mom factoid. How can this be relevant? Or is it a red herring? Raw. I eagerly await the unfolding of this fishy tale. The weather in Seattle is 29°C, cooler than last week, but it's still hot for Seattle under skies devoid of clouds, but haze with the smoke from wildfires raging in beautiful British Columbia. For those interested in a sensational blog about the Pacific Northwest's weather, climate, and related, I highly recommend the following, the Cliff Mass Weather blog. It provides amazing insights into current atmospheric phenomena by University of Washington atmospheric scientist researcher Cliff Mass, definitive Yeah, definitely my listener pick. The post from July 8th and July 6th discuss this smoke and its effects and some great satellite images and other striking visuals. Best wishes, Eric. Well, that was certainly a different take on that case. Wasn't it, Daniel?
That was.
That didn't even occur to me. I mean, I was not thinking along those lines at all.
All right. What else do we need to know, Daniel?
I don't think we need to know any. I guess we find out what happens next.
Did you endoscope them?
I didn't do it.
Did somebody endoscope them?
A board-certified, sleep-deprived gastroenterologist.
Right, a novice.
No. That was a great thing in Fort Collins. We had some outstanding gastroenterologists there.
Great.
And when she went into the ER with this story, it's great. You know, it's a small enough town, and there's a good enough rapport among all the physicians that they give you a call. Hey, you know, your patient is here. This is what's going on. We're going to do the endoscopy. You talk it through. Sounds great. And they go ahead and do it. And so in this case, they do an upper endoscopy. They pass a flexible scope with a camera, TV screen, into this young woman's stomach. This woman's in pain. And they actually see something that gives them the diagnosis.
Voila.
Voila!
And
what do you? I have a
I
call this a representative picture here that I'm going to show to Dickson. They see some worm-like.
Yes, looks like a thing.
Worm-like.
That's
thing
right.
That is actually, as they visualize it, it is attempting to burrow through the wall of her stomach.
What are we? I don't even know where.
So what I'm showing is a picture. It's a visual. You're inside the stomach,
yeah.
and you're seeing the pink gastric mucosa.
Right, got that.
And then there is a metal
pincer.
Metal pincer that has been advanced through the tube, and they are now grabbing this worm-like structure.
And they're pulling it out of the mucosa.
And they're going to pull it out of the mucosa and extract it from the woman.
Thing there, right?
So the curvy thing is the worm.
What's the straighter white thing here? Is it
here.
just a photo artifact of some kind?
No, that's actually the worm burrowing into the mucosa, and it's got a bend. They've got it caught on the bend there, and so it's burrowing in, and they've caught it.
Large,
and they're going
right?
to. It actually is quite large, and if you you can see these, and this is why I don't like to eat sushi rolls. I like to eat sashimi or the what is it called, Nagora
you
style.
You inspect it before
I like
you
to.
eat it.
I do actually. I like to just look at it and make sure
funny.
I don't
That's
see
funny.
a worm, because you can see
very
these
funny.
things.
Yeah,
and
they're
so I don't
visible.
like it hidden somewhere in the roll. I want to be able to see the fish before I eat it.
So did they pull this out of the mucosa?
They pulled this out, and she was all better.
And there was only one in the entire stomach?
Better, right?
Instantly better. There was only just the one trying to burrow in.
Sure.
So this was in the fish.
And that was curative.
And that's why it was so quick, because the worm immediately burrowed
Immediately
and that gave her
tries
the
to
pain.
burrow through the
That's
wall
right.
of the stomach.
And what kind of worm was it?
So it's Anisakis. And if we go back, I saw one of the emails where they bring up the two different, I'll say, main species. So Anisakis simplex or the Pseudoterranova discipiens are the two most common, but there are others, as people have talked about. Each different marine mammal has its own one. It's going to pass through this chain, and so there's going to these will be the most common, and
Sure.
we just call it Anisakis.
Which fish did you get it from?
That's a
I think she got it from the salmon.
Which was caught by her boyfriend, right?
Which was caught by the boyfriend, and it used to be quite common. I think there's some sort of a connection between Alaska and Colorado, where a lot of people go up, they work up there, they go up there for just various reasons, and during the summers, there's the different runs of the salmon. You can catch the salmon, and these are not commercial fishermen, so they don't have a nice chest of ice there that they throw them. They might catch them, they might put them on a stringer, they might carry them to the car. And so one is it goes through that period of time where the fish is dead, and these are migrating into the muscle. And then usually they're then not flash freezing it, which would be another way to kill these should they actually make it into the muscle.
So why did she only get...
luck of the draw.
Luck of the draw? Yeah.
That's luck of the draw.
It's not because... So one idea was that she was preparing it and popped a piece in and then froze it before her party, which would have killed it, right?
It would have killed it if she had frozen it. Yes, that's right. But classical freezing in a freezer distorts the texture. All right? There's something unpleasing.
Oh, you know what? I have a paper about that.
Do you?
I have to,
because I've got some history on this too. Really?
This is a perfect time. Let me find it while you're chatting.
Sure. So, no, I don't want to interrupt Daniel's explanation because I have some history to add to this.
No, this is good, and I'll let Dickson go into that. No,
All right.
So this is, and actually, Dickson and I recently wrote a chapter, right?
We did.
We wrote a chapter
tissue nematodes, and this was one of the tissue nematodes.
This was one of the issues that we went through.
Lightning striking twice. So, when I was at Rockefeller as a postdoc, a guest investigator we were called, but actually it's a postdoctoral position. I was early on. I was in the laboratory of Dr. George Jackson, who was in the larger group of William Traeger, and George Jackson was trying to culture nematodes. All right, that was what he was. His main thesis was that it would be important to have defined culture medium for, in this case, guess what he was trying to grow? Cenorebditis elegans. So, and he had others that he was trying to grow also. And they turned out to be fairly easy to grow on killed bacteria on culture plates. But if you wanted a chemically defined diet to grow these worms, you really had to work hard at this. All right. So, but in the meantime, he got an offer from the United States Food and Drug Administration for a job opening as their chief microbiologist in charge of food safety. He got another job offer also at the same time from the New York Times as the dance critic for the New York Times. So he had these two. He was at a crossroads. He didn't know what to do. He says, should I take the job at the New York Times and become the dance critic for the New York Times, or should I go to Washington and become the chief of the microbiology section for food safety?
Well, I know what I would do.
Well, I tell you what he did. He went to Washington, D.C., and he took the job as the chief microbiologist for food safety. And the reason why they brought him in was because of a recent weird epidemic of stomach disorders from the Netherlands, of people who had eaten Gruyne herring, which is green herring, and they developed these stomach pains, these incredible stomach pains that they could hardly stand. And it turned out that when they did gastroscopy on these people, they discovered the first cases of Anisakis.
Interesting.
So, by the way, they don't have to worry about Gruyne herring events anymore like that because they're so good to eat that they extincted them. So they don't get that anymore. But they learned very quickly from George Jackson's work down at the U.S. FDA that if you freeze the meat, of course, you ablate the effects because it kills the larvae. But how do you freeze them? That's the point. So they learned also that the sushi revolution was occurring in the United States at this point, and there were other episodes, not just Fort Collins, but other places too, of saltwater fish. This is saltwater fish now, right, with Anisakis larvae. So the procedure evolved to actually flash freeze the meat in liquid nitrogen. Mm-hmm. And if you do that, A, you kill the larvae, and B, you don't affect the texture of the meat. So that became the standard procedure. And I don't know if it's still being practiced because it's hard to believe that with so many sushi parlors that they all have liquid nitrogen containers in the back. I'm kind of suspicious of that, but I'll give them the benefit of the doubt until I get a stomach worm, and because I love sushi also.
So I found a paper not too long ago, and I've been waiting for the right time to talk about this. So here it is.
Apparently we're at that moment.
We are. It's perfect. This is published in Clinical Infectious Diseases, which is a good journal.
Right? It is.
And the title is the quality of sushi ruined by freezing raw fish and squid? A randomized double-blind trial with sensory evaluation using discrimination testing. And this is from Japan, as you might guess,
from Japan, right.
At Kobe University. And they say sushi is a traditional Japanese cuisine. However, using raw fish to make sushi may pose risk of certain parasitic infections, such as Anisakis. How do you say
Anisakis.
Anisakis. Actually, they call it Anisakidosis, right? Which is most reported in Japan. This risk can be eliminated by freezing. However, Japanese people are hesitant to freeze fish because it is believed that freezing ruins sushi's taste. So what they did was a randomized double-blind trial with discrimination testing to examine the ability of Japanese individuals to distinguish between frozen and unfrozen sushi, a pair of mackerel and squid sushi. One frozen once, the other not, was provided, and they were asked to answer which one tasted better. And the results after 120 rounds of discrimination testing involving the consumption of 240 pieces of mackerel sushi, unfrozen sushi was believed to taste better 42% of the time. I didn't put it in the show notes, so you can see that. Participants felt the taste was the same in 8% of the time. And for squid, unfrozen sushi was believed to be superior 48% of the time. Their conclusion is freezing fish does not ruin sushi's taste.
Right.
Of course, but people seem to prefer it unfrozen. These findings may encourage the practice of freezing fish before using it in sushi and help to decrease the incidence of Anisakis. I wonder how they froze it.
No, that's another good point.
So let's look at the methods.
Got to go to
here.
the methods.
Yeah, go to the.
If they used
online.
put it in a regular freezer, it's going to take longer, and that's going to.
Well, that's the issue of how you freeze it. How long? If you put it in a normal freezer, we say at least 24 to 48 hours. If you do it in liquid nitrogen, it's
immediate.
And they have a picture of an endoscopic finding of the worm on the
How
stomach
about that?
wall.
How about that?
Yeah, on the stomach of one of the authors.
Really?
In 2006.
Awesome.
And
Really?
it looks almost like you could see the pincer and the white worm being pulled out of the mucosa.
That's a classic
Oh, my
approach.
gosh.
A classic approach.
All right, methods. Let's see how they froze. Ingredient preparation. They were frozen in a freezer at minus 40, so it was not flash frozen.
No, that doesn't work that way.
Well, no, that would be actually what we want to know is that okay as far as the impact
Yeah.
on the texture? And then now CID has to publish now we did it in liquid nitrogen. Does that
It really should,
preserve
right?
the texture?
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, we could do that. I would volunteer to be a taste discriminator, and we could just eat a lot of sushi.
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah, so.
All right, that's very cool.
Right.
And so as soon as this worm was removed, she felt better. No treatment afterwards? Is
And
that
that's
right?
it. And that's it. And that is
Now,
great.
Could there have been other worms in the intestine? Not likely.
Oh, could there have been other? I don't think there were. I
But
mean,
the
I
fact
think
that
that
she felt
this is sort of a classic presentation. It's going to go through the wall. There's going to be pain.
Okay.
One of our letter writers put in about this. Somebody has a history of ingesting raw fish, and now they've got some symptoms. You're not sure what it is. They end up with this we call presumptive diagnosis, and they treat them with I think it was albendazole. I think it was albendazole in this study for a number of weeks, and do they get better? And we're not really sure.
All right.
But there is actually, unfortunately, let's say you hadn't gone, where was that worm doing? It was going to be an invasive
And
parasite.
what would happen then?
Then you could end up with continued symptoms. You could have eosinophilia. You could end up considering treatment with albendazole.
So if it pierced the stomach completely, where would it go? That's it?
It doesn't go any further. It gets into the wall of the stomach and then rounds up and then just stays there and
stays
dies.
there. I see. So it doesn't go out of the stomach.
No.
Okay.
At least
Got
I've
it.
never heard of one doing that.
All right. So that's a standard thing to do. You come to the ER with upper pain,
Fortunately-
quadrant pain, and you put a tube down and you look.
No, so the standard thing is to put the fish directly on ice and to not let this
That's right,
happen
that's
anymore.
right. Prevention.
But no, if they showed up, that would be.
So here in New York City, if someone goes to the ER with stomach pains, they do the same
if they
thing.
had a really good story and you said, I think this is Anisakis, let's just pass the scope and get it out.
But if there's no fish eating history, they probably wouldn't do it. Is that right?
True. So I had a student once from when I was teaching the medical students who actually was fortunate enough to have been taken to dinner at the Four Seasons and ordered flounder. And in the flounder flesh, he found a dead worm, of course, because it was cooked.
Yeah.
But he knew what he was looking for, and he actually brought it in and showed it to me. He says, look
Nice.
what we found at our dinner at
Was
the
it
Four Seasons.
Anisakis?
Apparently so.
Nice.
Apparently so.
Yeah, well, that can be in any nice restaurant. Right?
Yep. Thank God they didn't point it out to the head waiter. And
They would have gotten a free meal.
oh, waiter, there's a worm in my soup. I don't know what the joke response for that is. I know that.
If they should comp your meal if you have something
Well, of
like
course.
that.
Well, then they're going to give you another meal with more worms.
No, I would say just give me a bottle of wine.
Right? That's right. That's right.
I
that's
won't
right.
be eating tonight.
Yeah. What is the proper response for? Oh, waiter, what is this worm doing in my fish?
Yeah.
You may have
Backstroke,
missed this.
the surpiginous swimming.
Years ago, ago, when I was in college, we were eating at some restaurant in New York. A bunch of us, we got together over the holidays, and there was a cockroach in someone's salad.
Exactly.
I mean, they comped it, but who wants to eat anymore, right?
Nobody.
Yeah.
Nobody.
All right, let's do some email.
Sure.
We have a bunch of old guesses, which we won't read. I just want to mention Jan, our friend from, where's he from? Rotterdam? Can't remember.
I think so, actually.
Probably.
He guessed Teniasolium for one of the recent ones. S.J. Neglaria fowleri for one of the more recent ones. This was the HIV. This is the HIV candidiasis one. He's from the Eastern Sierra, where it's 18C. Very nice.
Right.
For this week, so he had a guess for this week. I guess I missed it. For this week, I strongly suspect Anisakis. No, I'm sorry. Excuse me. This was the fellow where the worm came out on the table. Right?
Oh, yes. So now.
And that was last week, which
that was
is
Ascaris.
He guessed Anisakis for that, but he was wrong. But that's good for this week.
Right.
Nice.
So we're in the Ascarid zone right now.
And he said it may or may not be a red herring.
I like that. That was good. You did well. And I will promise in the future. I have a colleague who's actually had several cases of Naegleria fowleri, and I'll bring one of those. It's not particularly common, fortunately.
Exactly.
Another one from Mark, who guessed neurocysticercosis, which was a while ago.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
He says, "I'm neither physician." Excuse me.
Sounds like you need a physician.
I think just a glass of water.
Glass of water, right.
I have a tickle in my throat. I'm neither physician nor microbiologist, but a pharmacist who finds your show fascinating.
Good.
Dennis sent a link to a new Leishmania vaccine paper. This was published in Science. Did you see this, Dickson?
I might have.
Let's see what it is. I'm loading, and waiting. A sandfly salivary protein vaccine shows efficacy against vector-transmitted cutaneous leishmaniasis in non-human primates.
Huh.
Didn't we do a TWiP once on a salivary protein vaccine? Maybe for another parasite, not Leishmania, right?
It might have been for malaria. But,
yeah.
Who are the authors?
These are from Turkey.
Ah.
Is that correct? No, this is present address. I don't know what their author affiliations. Hang on, let me click the little plus. Oh, NIH.
Right. Rubiero.
Brazil.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
yes, Brazil and NIH.
Yeah. They're big on that stuff, and they're good at it.
So they got a salivary protein from the fly.
Yeah, not the parasite, but the parasite-dependent protein from the salivary secretions. Isn't that interesting?
And they immunized the monkeys with this, and it protects them.
How about that?
Now, why would this be?
So there's a symbiosis between the fly and the parasites that it transmits.
So this protein in the saliva is needed for the parasite to
infect. That's
successfully infect.
That's exactly correct.
So as you said many years ago, Dickson, saliva is a pharmacopoeia.
I did say that, but I learned that from Dr. Robert Guads, who was also on our show. Yeah, because he was a good friend of Marco Rubio. And I don't think his first name is Marco, but his last name is Rubiero. And he's Brazilian, and he's an entomologist, and he's a first-class entomologist. He's really a molecular entomologist, basically, and highly respected, and I tip my hat off. I hope it's a successful vaccine, because if they would have to probably use this as a molecular cloned, DNA-type vaccine, do you think? It has the encoding for the protein, and you inject it under the skin and hope for the best, or how would you go
maybe
about this?
Purified protein.
That's going to be tough, though, right? You have to raise sandflies for that one.
Well, you could clone the gene and produce it in a heterologous
Exactly.
system.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay.
Daniel, you should take Eric's.
Hey, doctors. Hopefully this hasn't already been plugged, but I wanted to share a link to a case studies column on the New York Times. Are you going to click on that while we do this there?
Yeah.
This month's case is a type of case that Dr. Griffin has promised but has yet to deliver. What did I promise? I don't know.
This was in the magazine section,
I won't
right?
spoil it more than that.
It's in the paper.
Well, not all of the cases that the columnist Dr. Lisa Saunders writes up are about parasites, a fair amount are. If you're the first to guess the right cause, she'll send you a signed copy of her book. She almost always includes any pertinent physician notes, and more than once I've made sense of a test or note because I had already learned about it on TWiP. I also provided a link to another case that I thought you or the listeners might enjoy. It's another New York Times link. Thanks for all the fun. Eric from Irvine, where the sun is too bright and the temperature too high.
Irvine, they've just got their first vertical farm, so go out and shop and get the freshest produce you can possibly get from Urban Produce.
Well, these kind of case things are nothing new, of course.
No.
Although we recently just started doing them here on
You
TWiP.
can't get
But you would think
tired
that
of
Dr.
hearing about
Sanders,
this.
she should mention us, you know?
Should she? If we just
She might not be
mentioned her.
aware of us.
Why not? Why isn't she aware of us?
Well, maybe we should
So
send
anyway, these are called
Invite her on.
Think Like a Doctor, and two links that he sent. One is
Yeah.
so this is Lisa Sanders, MD, and the challenge: can you solve a medical mystery involving a healthy 31-year-old woman who, while working in Africa, starts seeing wavy patterns before her eyes, followed by terrible headaches, odd tingling sensations, and tiny strokes that just won't stop. So she actually provides some of the medical records from these cases. You know, there's a whole list of things here. Actually, it looks like the original document with things redacted for privacy. So most of the things that Daniel provides, it's quite extensive. It's many pages, many pages.
Nice.
And then the other one he sent was, can you figure out what's wrong with a 58-year-old woman with bad arthritis who develops a terrible wasting illness after what looked like a simple cold? So she gives you all the clues, and then she gives physician notes, and then I guess at some point you guess and she'll solve it later. So interesting. They have lots of pictures here. It's cool. But I think our approach is better because we're talking and you get to hear us rather than Dr. Griffin in the fancy New York Times, you know, who will never mention us even though we're just as good as she is. I'm quite jealous of this, of course, because I would like to have the readership of the New York Times.
Well, if you talk to the salespeople, you might change your mind on that one.
This is one thing that bothers me about science communication. Nobody mentions anyone else except us. We do it often. But people who
there's
write
no
about
sharing.
science,
Yeah,
there's no
that's
sharing. They don't
right.
say, hey, you know,
That's right.
these guys
That's
do
right.
something similar. You should check them out. Everyone is concerned at protecting their little turf.
Always,
I think this is the antithesis of communication. Okay?
And the antithesis of what science is supposed to be. I think when people and our tax dollars, right, go to fund science, we want scientists working together, collaborating, being as productive as possible, not fighting over grant money and keeping everything to themselves.
It's inevitable, though, people that when there is a scarce resource and lots of people who
So
want
more
it.
money in research, and we'll collaborate more. Is that what
There
you're
it
saying?
is. But keep the number of people the same.
That is the key.
Right. Trouble is, when you add more money, everybody else wants to come in too, so you get more people.
Can you take Steve's email,
Sure,
Dickson?
absolutely. Hi, TWiPers. I think number 90 was one of your most amusing and informative TWiPs. I was particularly impressed with the case history guesses by Daniel's daughters. Very bright young women indeed. Your botfly case reminded me of my old friend Peter, who used to write the Belize Rough Guide. We rather thought he was taking his research for the book a bit far sometimes, as he always seemed to come back with another parasite or disease. He was a regular visitor to the London School of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene. Actually, it's Tropical Hygiene and Medicine, where they used to look forward to seeing what he came back with next. People really do need to be careful in Belize because Peter test drove unintentionally both malaria and leishmaniasis, and on one occasion also brought home what he called his pet, which was a botfly larva growing in his forearm. He was quite proud of it and enjoyed grossing people out by showing his pet to them. He successfully brought it to term, but I don't know what happened to it after that. Peter was actually very careful when traveling and researched health advice thoroughly for each of his books. He knew more about malaria than our local hospital, where they flatly wouldn't believe he could have had it when he went through a relapse episode of it while back home and needed more medicine in a hurry. The fact that he collected several TWiPs worth of parasites, despite knowing the risks and advising others on them, should serve to illustrate how vigilant one needs to be while traveling. Sadly, despite never having smoked, Peter died much too young of throat cancer. Oh dear. I wonder if it might have been caused by something else he collected in his travels. With any luck, your triumvirate of podcasts may help elucidate people, may help educate people to be at least a little wary whilst enjoying their exotic holidays. All the best, Steve.
Continue, there's more.
Oh, there is more, isn't there? So he continues to write, where it is rather grey but refreshingly windy today in Bedfordshire, England, which started rather strangely with a massed gathering of noisy jackdaws, crows, and magpies all together on a small cherry tree at the bottom of the garden. I have no idea what they were up to. There are often red kites overhead. That's a predatory bird. They have come back very quickly after reintroduction in the 80s. I couldn't see them this morning. P.S. Great about the belugas. I looked for your YouTube reports from your show and was interested to see the locals saying they were diving for bunker, a fish that I hadn't heard of. The wiki on this is quite interesting, and Dickson might have something to say about how the Native Americans used to use it for fertilizer. I seem to recall reading advice to plant a sardine with each maize seed before, and it's nice to find out where that idea came from. Apparently, the fish is now overfished for oil and animal feed, which in turn upsets the ecology of the bay, so maybe it is a very good sign that there seems to be enough about to attract the beluga, or belugas. Belugay? Belugas, I think, beluga. Also, I wonder if it might be clear... try it again. Also, wondering if this might clear up a mystery. And now I have this little icon in front. Okay, I'll read it again. Also, wondered if this might clear up a mystery to me as to where all the cod liver oil from our supermarket shelves was coming from when there is supposed to be a shortage of cod. I once asked our food standards agency if they ever checked fish oils for authenticity and was surprised to be told that they did not. Dear.
Well, plant a bunker we used to get for bait.
Yeah.
To go crabbing.
Yeah. Or you can use them for blue fishing or striped bass. And there are fly, artificial fly imitations that are tied to represent a bunker, and they're quite beautiful ties of flies and for saltwater fly fishing.
I think it was you on a podcast who said the natives used to put a seed. Yeah. With a piece of fish in the ground. They showed the American colonists how to do that.
And they didn't do it. The American colonists didn't do it. And they said, what are you doing that? You should eat the fish. And, of course, their plants failed because the soils are very poor in New England.
Let's see. So Kurt guesses a Taenia for a recent one, which we got. Bill writes, in a recent podcast, you discussed the practice of using water bottles to sterilize water via sunlight.
Right.
Raw PET, which is a plastic, right, allows over 50% of UV to penetrate down to about 320 nanometers. Peak antibacterial activity is around 260 nanometers, but duration of 8 hours in the sunlight compensates for this attenuation, and a very high percent are killed via a day in the sun. Spores are more resistant but are removed to the filtration you spoke of. And he sends a link to a paper that discusses this. So I had questioned whether UV would get into the plastic, but as he says, it does penetrate this kind of plastic. Yeah. PET stands for polyethylene
phthalate.
No, let's look it up. I'll just type here. I make a lot of mistakes. PET plastic. Polyethylene terephthalate.
Terephthalate. I was right about that.
Molded into plastic bottles for foods and beverages.
Yeah, they're going to discontinue the use of phthalates, though, because there's some bad press about that with regards to carcinogenicity. So I subscribe to Chemical and Engineering News, and the chemical industry is very upset about the fact that the EPA has said the phthalates have to go because it's used in plastics that little kids can come in contact with, like for nursing bottles and stuff like that. So,
Daniel, can you read Heather's?
Heather writes, "Hello, doctors. I have not had time to write to TWiP in a long time because I am back in graduate school. Congratulations. This is significant because my return is partially inspired by the Twix podcasts, which were my only link to science during the years I worked out of field. I am currently finishing my master's degree part-time while working in field as a laboratory manager at a small state college. I am very happy that you have added Daniel to the show. He brings a lot of energy and an interesting perspective. I've been enjoying the case studies. Maybe I will have time to guess one of them soon. Would you be open to doing a fish or shellfish case study? If I can find you a good one to send you, keep up the good work. Yeah, Heather, send us stuff. We're always happy to take a look at it.
You bet.
Daniel writes, "Hello, I just discovered your podcast and immediately became a fan." Did you write this, Dan?
No. No.
Great work. Now my question. I am somewhat of a parasitophobe, but I love smoking cigars. Cigars happen to come from Central American countries, which I learned from your tapeworm episodes have widespread problems with tapeworms.
Good question.
Do you know if there is any risk in contagion from hand-rolled cigars? If the person rolling is contaminated, there could possibly be contamination of the cigar itself, right? I'm curious to know if I should start cleaning my cigars before smoking them. While cleaning them might cause the things to break, I'd rather have a broken cigar than a tapeworm infection. Would like to get a reply. Thanks in advance. Your new fan, Dan.
Can I step in and recommend, I don't know if you've been watching the news, but there's been some recent stuff about how smoking may actually be bad for your health. So I know
presume
that
was a joke.
So I'm going to say, cigars are a health risk, and the tapeworms are probably the least of the concern with the cigar smoking.
I would agree.
So yeah, I would. There are other bad habits one can acquire that do not have a health risk. So Dan, I'm going to encourage you to eat cold turkey.
All right. Let's skip down to Brigitte Dickson.
Okay. We're skipping down. Brigitte writes, "Hello. I read about an interesting theory in Karl Marx's Parasite Rex." Karl Marx is actually not his name.
What is his name, Dickson?
It's Carl Zimmer.
Yeah.
The book did not go into great detail, but I would like to hear your thoughts. The book talked about parasites and allergies. Do you think that parasites can actually prevent allergies? People have used parasites for illnesses and infections for decades, though many of them did more harm than good. Thank you, Bridget. Well, we had a session on that, actually, in one of our TWiPs, where Crohn's disease and irritable bowel syndrome and several other disorders of that magnitude were actually ablated during a brief, 2 or 3 year infection period with animal nematodes that were similar to human parasites. Okay, so like Trichuris suis, which infects pigs, rather than Trichuris trichiura, which infects people. The danger of having a Trichuris suis infection is low, and it turns out that the immune system that caused the allergy was, in fact, generated through evolutionary history to attack intestinal parasites, and particularly nematodes. So by redirecting the immune system to its original targets through the evolution of humans, they took their attention away from the tissue of the gut tract itself. And that was the basis for now what it appears to be a standard therapy for short-term treatment for severe Crohn's disease. So yeah, parasites, they're not all bad.
We used to call them immunosuppressive. Now we call them immunomodulatory.
That's right. In this case, it's redirecting the immune system.
Redirecting, yes.
Yeah. So,
all right, just a couple more. Daniel, can you take Justin's?
Justin writes, "I thought this might be worthy of a TWiP, since everyone loves pathogens that are implicated in behavior changes." And here we have researchers from the University of Leeds, Queen's University Belfast, and Stellenbosch University in South Africa found a tiny parasite, Plastophora mulleri, not only significantly increased cannibalism among the indigenous shrimp, Gomaris dubeni celticus, but made infected shrimp more voracious, taking much less time to consume their victims.
My goodness.
We have a link. Right now on the Cross Island Ferry, heading to Orient Point, and it's sunny, 0°C, and a calm, windy, open water day.
Is it called the Cross Island? Orient Point is way out there, right?
Yeah.
And it goes from Orient Point to New London.
Oh, I see. Why is it called the
Second,
cross island? Because it's crossing from the island to the
Exactly.
mainland?
Exactly.
Because there's a cross island parkway, but that's closer to New York, right?
Yeah, that stays within Long Island. This is the ferry that goes right across Long Island.
And I love that ferry. And if you time it just right, there are casinos along the way, and if you catch like the 8:30. Now, I'm not gambling. It's the fireworks displays.
Oh, cool.
So you get free fireworks.
Yeah. I once had the privilege and pleasure of fishing at the Rip, which is between Orient Point and I think
Plum Island.
Yes. And that is just an amazing experience to be in that Rip all day long as it fluctuates back and forth with the tides.
And it really, that is a challenging place to sail. And I happened to be on the South Fork in a tiny sail, 26-foot sailboat, and it's time to leave. And small craft advisories, the ferries aren't even running, and I'm supposed to be leaving and sailing from south through the Rip up to New London.
Oh boy!
And I say to my mom, "Yeah, I'm not really." She's like, "Dan, you're a good sailor. You'll be fine." And we actually sailed this 26-foot boat through the Rip, and we're sitting there struggling to get through.
Powerful.
And the Coast Guard's sitting about 100 feet off, just watching,
right,
waiting to see if they need to help us. But we were able to finally pull it through.
Yeah. The other big thrill I had once was again fishing for striped bass near New London and actually seeing an atomic submarine surface. This was like a Los Angeles class atomic submarine. It was an enormous vessel.
You knew it was atomic.
Oh, there was no mistaking it whatsoever. The Electric Boat Company is right there. And they were coming back for, I guess, their 6-month duty or something like this. But it was an enormous vessel, just frightening.
And they just pop up.
You're
out there, and all of a sudden this thing appears.
Pop up, and then you're not expecting anything like that, and there it is. And my first vision, of course, was the Sean Connery film Hunt for Red October, which is a great movie.
They have a regular diesel sub down at next to the Intrepid here in New York.
Yes.
The aircraft carrier.
Yes, that's right. It has a Beaumark missile on the deck, by the way.
So the sub is next to it.
Yeah.
It's a little black thing. It's quite small, and I've been in it. And It's a diesel engine. But what was interesting is underneath the floor, they put all their cans of food to store them.
Right.
Because you have a little space there, and they're just lined to make the best use of every space. It's very claustrophobic.
It's very
imagine.
claustrophobic. So right.
Oh my gosh. All right. We have a long email from someone who wants medical advice, but we can't really give that to you on this show. We do have a physician, but as you know, you can't do this via the internet. You have to be there and have the patient in front of you and take their history. So, we appreciate that you're interested in our advice, but we can't provide it to you. So sorry about that. And that's it for our email. Let's do another case.
Okay.
Great.
All right.
Do you have one for us, Daniel?
I do, actually. And, we had a paper where we tossed about discussing, but I think we're going to push that off because otherwise we will be here all day.
Yes.
Not that we don't enjoy being here so much. So this is a very recent case, and the fact that we're going to take a hiatus may mean that there may be some developments. This is a case that April. So during April of 2015, right? So here we are I guess we're in July. This patient was coming back, which is why it came to mind again, just last Tuesday. But we have a 39-year-old gentleman, and he immigrated to the U.S. from El Salvador in 2002, 13 years ago. And he was seen as an outpatient in the infectious disease clinic. He reports that about 2 years ago, he started having issues with constipation on and off. He also reports that his throat hurts him, and at times he feels like it's closing when he tries to lay flat. He also says that now for several years he's had this skin irritation on his upper chest and arms. What brought him to us is he tried to donate blood and was told that he should see his doctor because his blood was rejected for donation, and his primary care physician referred him to our infectious disease clinic. Okay. That is the
wheels are spinning.
the history of present illness.
So they obviously found something in his blood that and is this a typical procedure that they would not tell you what's in it but tell you to go see your doctor?
It's actually pretty common that a lot of times if someone told you, oh, your blood tested positive for such, you wouldn't necessarily know what to do.
Yeah.
So they say, you should see your doctor, and they communicate with the doctor, and hopefully the doctor is going to educate and explain what this test means.
Right.
All right. So now this man is married.
So this
Single?
man is he is married. He has a wife, 2 teenage children.
Does he have extramarital sex?
He does not.
As
He has, we'll do our sort of toxic habit and behavior. So he is just with his wife. He smokes 2 to 3 cigarettes. He was smoking 2 to 3 cigarettes per day, but has now quit.
Good for him. Tell me, how old is he?
He did have an issue in the past with drinking a bit too much, but now he is, on the wagon. He is not.
Give us age again, please.
39.
He is 39.
39. And how long did he live in El Salvador?
He lived in El Salvador till he was 23, 26.
Okay. Okay.
And
Okay.
do you want to know much about where he
No,
lived
I
in
don't
El
know. This is
Salvador?
fine.
Is it rural or city life?
So he was an agricultural worker in a rural part of El Salvador.
Okay.
What kind of agriculture, may I ask? Coffee?
I
Bananas?
didn't ask what specific.
Oh, you see, that might have some bearing here.
And has he any other complaints in his lifetime?
Yeah, right.
Medical type complaints?
So he does have a history of asthma, and he's on a number of medicines for that. He's on a steroid nasal spray, as well as a steroid inhaler and a bronchodilator, Ventolin or albuterol inhaler.
Any visual problems?
He is not reporting any visual problems.
Any unusual physical lumps or bumps?
No, he does have this. He does have this rash,
Right. Any
which
other
we'll
physical?
look at when we get there.
Any other physical things to note? Is he underweight, overweight, just on point?
No, he's actually healthy. He's healthy appearing. He's comfortable when we see him.
Okay.
He did have a inguinal hernia repair on the right in the past. Not allergic to any medicines. His family history, I will say his mother previously had a heart attack. His father has peptic ulcer disease, a history of peptic ulcer disease, and his mother had diabetes. They're still down in El Salvador.
And this was turned up on a sort of a routine blood smear?
Okay, he was an outpatient.
Or they did a blood
They did some sort
test.
of a screening blood test that they do before they
Okay,
allow your blood to go
okay.
into the blood supply.
Right.
And
Because he's
apparently
from
something was
a
abnormal.
semi-tropical or tropical country, so they have a fairly robust list of things that they watch for in terms of that. And apparently he had one of those.
Here in the U.S., what we watch for, right? So can
Yeah.
one find a list of things that are looked for in the blood?
You could go online and find the CDC list of blood diseases which would prevent you from giving blood.
I think our listeners should do that and then try to match them with the
I think
symptoms.
they could look,
right?
and I think that's
That'd be
reasonable.
smart.
This
That'd
is
be smart.
the way this person is presenting is, I think, fairly typical for this diagnosis. And people were actually joking when we were talking, like we've turned into the blank clinic because we're recognizing more of these cases. But he, in addition to the fact that he was rejected for blood donation, he has some symptoms here that may actually be suggestive of what's going on. I just throw that out to our listeners.
And you said since we're facing a hiatus of our show, maybe by the time we resume, things will have become clearer in terms of what's actually going on.
Yeah, because I will tell our listeners that we've already sent out some testing, which has come back. So we've confirmed the chief diagnosis, but we're also trying to better understand some of these other symptoms. We have some specialists involved and some other testing.
Have you initiated treatment?
I'm gonna leave that till
Okay,
we.
okay.
Yeah, I don't want to throw
Give it
that
away, I
I don't want
guess.
to throw that in yet.
Right.
That opens a whole, as we say, can of worms. His
Big pun
his
intended.
physical examination, as I mentioned, was pretty unremarkable. His asthma was in good control, lungs were clear. Guy weighs 177 pounds. He's 5'10". He's afebrile. His heart rate's in the 80s, 120s over 80s on blood pressure. And the only thing really remarkable on the exam is he's got a bit of a mild rash in his upper chest and upper extremities.
And has he had this rash for 2 years?
It's been for years.
And the constipation has been 2 years?
The constipation has actually been going on for a couple of years.
And the throat closing also 2 years?
The throat about.
Okay. Does he often give blood?
No, this was his first time that he tried to donate blood.
And
that's a good question, right? Let's say he had been routinely giving blood, and then all of a sudden, then you'd get some issue of the chronicity.
The thing is, he's been sick for 2 years. What makes him think he can now go out and give blood?
That's an interesting question.
But I think it's also a question of, does he consider himself sick? If you had constipation issues, would you say, I'm an ill person? You'd say, no, I have, bowel issues. A lot of folks have bowel issues.
Well, if it all of a sudden started 2 years ago, I would, I have a chronic bowel issue. I better get fixed, right? I wouldn't wait 2 years, that's for sure.
Yeah, I would say.
But see, he's that altruism we talked about. He's out there. He doesn't feel well, but he still wants to give back. He still wants to do it.
Right.
Is that it, you think?
I think that gives people what they need to know.
Plenty of leeway. Yeah.
Is there anything else we need to ask Dickson?
Anything else we would ask would
give it away.
Jeopardize the secrecy of this case.
We have a lot of data here. All right. I think I will release. So today is July 9th.
Yes.
Now, I'm not going to release this weekend, right?
Could wait another week on this. Could wait a week on this.
In the meantime, we're going to still get guesses to the last one, unfortunately.
It's true.
But
now they'll know because you can. Oh, they won't know because you have to put it up
well,
there.
we can keep track.
See, the thing is, it's going to be then over a month before we solve this one.
We'll have hundreds of guesses.
Yeah, we'll have hundreds of guesses. So I'll put this out a week and a half from today.
Fair.
All right. Does that sound like a good plan? Sounds fair. In the meantime, take your guesses and enjoy your July and August. Go listen to TWiP and TWiM, which we will continue to produce throughout this time. Indeed. And you can find TWiP at microbeworld.org/TWiP. You can also find us on iTunes if you have a mobile device, whether it be an iOS-powered or an Android-powered device. There are various podcatchers that you can use to subscribe to TWiP. And it's free. All of it is free for your consumption forever. All the episodes are out there. And if you have questions or comments or you want to guess about the clinical case, TWiP at twiv.tv. And tell that doc over at the New York Times that she should listen to us. Or even join us sometimes. Daniel Griffin is here at Columbia University Medical Center. Thank you, Daniel.
Oh, it's always a pleasure.
Enjoy your holiday.
Oh, thank you.
See you when are you leaving? Tomorrow?
This is not really a holiday. No, and actually, I'm not leaving until sometime in August. It's just
I'm called a busman's holiday. This is a busman's holiday, right?
Dickson's leaving, and then
All right. Well, maybe Daniel and I could do a TWiP without you. Huh? No, we wouldn't do that.
Very possible.
We wouldn't do that.
Very possible.
Well, enjoy your working.
Whatever
you call it. Dickson Despommier is at Racaniello.org, medicalecology.com, verticalfarm.com, urbanag.ws. Thank you, Dickson.
Welcome, Vincent.
And you're going out west?
I am.
Enjoy.
With my wife, we're driving out west.
That should be cool. Don't eat raw fish.
No, we don't eat the fish. We just catch them, and we throw them back.
Could there be a parasite? A freshwater fish. What kind of parasite would be in freshwater?
Well, there's one called Gondolanema perstand. So that's out there. In fact, there was a sushi outbreak in Mexico from eating raw freshwater fish, and that was the parasite that they acquired.
All right, well, enjoy it as well.
Pulchrum is the last name of that.
I'm going to be here. I'm not going anywhere.
You will. You'll be in what they call it, splendid isolation, as it were.
Doing TWiP and TWiM and blogging. I'm happy.
Right.
What could be better? And I'm Vincent Racaniello. You can find all the stuff I do with science communication at virology.ws. The music you hear on TWiP is composed and performed by Ronald Jenkins. You can find his work at ronaldjenkins.com. You've been listening to This Week in Parasitism. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back not too soon.
We'll be back in the future.
We will be back.
I'll
be back.
Another TWiP.
is
parasitic.